Today on the podcast, I have a past client, Kelly, who is sharing with us all of the lessons that have stuck with her since we were coaching almost 2 years ago at this point. She speaks about the importance of not compartmentalizing your emotions from work because otherwise you bring those emotions home with you later and they affect your home life. She shares her specific ways that she's learned how to do that and what stuck with her in coaching. She shares one of her most pivotal tools that she uses regularly, thought adoption, which is really just a practical tool to help shift your mindset and create intentional mindsets. And I think one of my favorite parts of this episode was when she shared with us what coaching really did for her as a leader, as a manager of people. If you've ever wondered what the investment in coaching gets you long term, this is an episode you're not going to want to miss. You ready? Let's get to it. Okay, hello, working moms. I have a special treat for you today. I have somebody that I coached with. Now it's been at least 18 months, and which means that we started coaching 2+ years ago at this point. And she's coming on the podcast to talk about some of the lessons that have learned, like the longevity of some of the lessons learned. And as she reflects back to our time 2 years ago, what that experience was like and what has continued to kind of grow inside of her and the tools she still uses. I'm just really excited because she's going to bring so much perspective to what the coaching process was. And I think we're going to hear a little bit of her story here too, but so many big life changes have happened in the last couple of years. And it's all coincided with so many amazing things happening in her career. And she's going to have a wealth of knowledge for us. So I'm excited she's here. Thank you, Kelly, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump in here.
Sure. So I'm Kelly Luttinen. I'm a strategy director at a marketing agency. I am a mom of 3, which happened pretty quickly because I also had a set of twins. Yeah. And I've really valued my coaching experience.
Yeah. Now we started and you weren't pregnant. So I just want to be clear.
Yes.
How old was your daughter?
I think Addie was a year, maybe towards a year and a half. But yeah.
It was somewhere around a year and a half. And then it was somewhere towards the end of our 6 months together that you found out you were pregnant. And then you found out you were pregnant with twins, right? So it was all these things happened simultaneously. And I think that you had just kind of gotten a promotion at work, which is what kind of triggered the coaching process and so forth as well. So there was so much going on.
Yes.
At that time.
Totally. And both of my last 2 promotions have coincided with having a baby or having 2 babies.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I was promoted to associate director when I had Addie, and then was promoted to director when I had the twins.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to talk about it again here on the podcast, but I have a whole episode that's just recently come out. I recorded it recently, but I know it's going to come out before this one, where I talk about this intersection, of career advancement for women tends to happen about a decade into our career-ish. And around that time happens to be when we start having kids. And this intersection between these 2 really big milestones in our life, and how do we balance them? How do we manage them? How do we do them both well? Right? That's the heart of what I do as a coach, but it's messy.
Mm-hmm.
It's messy. When we started together, tell me a little bit about what you remember about where you were at and kind of why you said yes to this coaching experience.
Yeah. First of all, I was very grateful for it. I had been promoted to associate director. I was over, at the time we were growing as an agency, and I was over a new service line as well as some disciplines kind of within my field that we hadn't always clarified those roles. And so we were growing, we were hiring, and we were also launching this new service line. So not only was I a new mom and definitely new to leadership, and that was a steep learning curve, I was trying to show leadership in a really a space that wasn't well defined. And I had the freedom to help define that, but it felt like a really steep learning curve.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was a lot of needing to prove myself through all of
Yes.
this, right?
Yes.
So absolutely. So what do you remember as being the challenges then as you tried to manage being a new manager and being a mom at the same time?
Yeah. I always thought when people talked about like work life balance things, especially for moms, I thought it was more of home life coming into your work. And for me,
Mhm.
it was really opposite. It was my work coming into my home life too
Yeah.
much. And I felt that I wasn't being as present as I wanted to be necessarily. Yeah. I mean, it was just navigating two very important and very new roles to me at the same time. It was just a lot to process.
Yeah, for sure. So we re-engaged with each other just not that long ago, like literally a couple of weeks ago or whatnot. I had always had the intention of reconnecting, but I knew life was crazy with twins and all the things, right? And we had talked at some point. We're like, we're gonna reconnect at some point, who knows when that is? Well, 18 months later, here we are, and I can't even believe looking at the pictures of the twins how big they are. It's craziness. So now we've re-engaged 18 months later, and I started asking you these questions around what do you remember about coaching? Like what stuck with you? Like cuz you as we were re-engaging you were mentioning things like, "Oh yeah, you taught me this. Oh yeah, I learned this." And so it was like, yes, I love obviously it's super validating to me in the work that I do to have clients come back to me and say, this was life changing to me. This is still a practice that I use. This is still a tool that I use. This is still something that sat with me that changed me, right? Obviously very validating to me. It's validating to coaching, I think, as a process, and that it works, right? But it doesn't just have quick fixes. It's not just like digging you out of a hole. It's like it has longevity to it. Has life changing qualities to it. And obviously 18 months isn't life, but it is a good amount of time with a lot of lived experience with the tools and the strategies and the mindsets and things that we learned, that it gives us there's enough life lived to tell us something about what has really stuck. And so I want to talk a little bit here today about what's really stuck in coaching. And so what's one of the first things that comes to mind as you think about answering that question?
Yeah, so many tools. But the first that comes to mind is when we defined my values. Um, because suddenly I felt like I understood like the innate pull that I have and
Mm.
why I make the choices I make. And I know it's so obvious. And so, like, there were so many points in our coaching journey where I felt like you just illuminated something that, like, I probably knew but wasn't paying attention to. And values for me, not only understanding my own, but understanding that other people do not value inherently what I value, was transformational.
Why?
One, because there were certain pressures I was putting on myself. I was really worried, should I be getting an MBA right now? That was a major concern I had. And not to say that someday I may pursue one, but
But it was
through
coming. It was coming because you were feeling sort of like an imposter, right? It was feeling like you were lacking something instead of it
yeah,
coming from. If you do it now, it's because you want to do it. It's because it serves
right.
you, because it meets goals, right?
Exactly.
Not from a
E-
reactive place.
Exactly. And just making sure you're not exactly that, making sure you're not making decisions from a place of worry, but rather a place of intention. Um, and noticing when I do certain things repeatedly, sometimes that's because I'm fulfilling a need I have because of my values. One value for me that was really it stood out was, I think we called it adventure or exploration, but it's
Yeah,
this idea of I like to be outside of myself. I need to be in a place where I feel a little uncomfortable, which is funny because I don't always feel good being uncomfortable, but it is an innate need within me. And it's why I travel and it's why I volunteer for things I may not have, full skill
time for
set for right now. Yeah, or time or yeah, but like noticing that and seeing that as something that I uniquely bring
it. Mhm.
was amazing.
Yeah, I I want to go back to this idea that understanding that people don't always value what we value and how important that is, because I think this is really important as a leader, as a manager of other people, to understand this concept, because oftentimes what I like to say is when there's conflict between two people, it's oftentimes we see it as, us versus them, when in reality it's really their values versus your values, right? Your philosophy versus their philosophy. It's not personal. And I think that my guess is that was a piece of the eye-opening nature of this, is recognizing that you weren't personally being attacked when there was conflict, or if your direct reports were pushing back or doing what, it had nothing to do with you. It was like they had a whole different view, a whole different lens of life than you did.
Totally. Well, and even, I mean, to that value I just described, exploration, I would find a new project very exciting. And so that's my mindset I go into it with. So,
You have all this
even,
energy about it.
right, like that's very motivating to me. And recognizing sometimes in assigning someone to a new project, their first reaction might be fear, or it may be worry, or it may be apprehension, or any other emotion. So, absolutely.
And then as a manager, having to like interact with them in a different way, right? Instead of getting frustrated or irritated, or what, I mean, however your response might be to that person, to like hold a little space, knowing that they don't have that value of adventure, and new feels really, not that they can't do it, but it's just going to take something different for them to like get in the game, right?
Right. Right. Or finding space. I mean, it even allowed me to talk about values with my team and uncover things that they needed for them, so that in a space of like a new assignment or something, we could still find a way to speak to what they needed in it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm taking us off script here a little bit, because I know we had a little bit of agenda, but I am curious, like as you have then grown as a leader and a manager, what did you personally coaching, how have you seen the impact of that as a leader and a manager of other people beyond just this values? I mean, I see this as super valuable, and I'm sure there are other things. So I'm just curious.
Yeah. I feel like one Rebecca ism that I have said to a lot of people who are my direct reports, we had a day where I came to a coaching session and I felt energized and I felt so good. And I had led a brainstorming session and I was just like, I just think I'm good at this and I feel really comfortable in this space. And this was at a time where I was doing, because of my new role, a lot of things that felt more uncomfortable. And you reminded me, you were like, you probably didn't always feel that way about leading a brainstorm. And what you are doing now, the work you are putting in, you are honing these skills. You will get to that place of comfort. It's not now, you're in a growth stage. And so there are so many times where I have members on my team who might be in a stretch place where they're put on a project they don't feel 100% comfortable on. And I have all the faith in the world of my team's abilities, and I can see that they can do it. But reminding them that it's going to take a little discomfort, but that I know that they can do it. So I definitely have repeated that lesson to them.
Yeah, I love that. That actually, if you are sort of uncomfortable, you're probably doing it right. Right? You're
Yeah.
going after, if the goal is like to live a really big, full life, that you are going after big things and the things you want that you don't have right now, that process is inevitably uncomfortable, because you are doing things that you don't already do, or isn't coming naturally to you, or you don't already have. And so there's discomfort in that, right? So it actually says you're doing something right if you're feeling
Yeah.
that level of discomfort. I love that. This reminds me of a statistic that I actually I find totally fascinating, and it's they call it, what do they call it? They call it the failure ratio. No, that's not it. I'm going to come up with the name of it, but it's essentially studies have been done that have come up with the percentage of times in your life that you should be failing. Okay.
Mm.
The percentage is 16%. That's what stands out to me. 16% of the time you should be failing at things. Okay. So that's a little bit more than 1 in 5 times that you put yourself out there to do something and you miss the mark. That's a lot of times.
Yeah.
right? And they find that the research that's been done around this like failure equation, whatever it's called, is has to do with the idea that if you're not failing enough, then you're not learning enough, right? You're not growing
Mhm.
enough. You're not building the internal skill sets or the external skill sets to kind of go after big things. And if you are failing too little, or if you're failing too much, then you're feeling too like downtrodden, right? You kind of get stuck in the like imposter syndromes and all the things, right? So there's this like very sweet spot, and I find that I just love that idea because, and the fact that it's been researched, because we get so scared to put ourselves in growth situations and to push ourselves in that way, and particularly us as women, right? Like we're known for not taking on projects or wanting to do things unless we know it 100% of the time, right? We hear that stat a lot when it comes to like going after jobs and things like that. So I love it. I know you're so growth focused.
Well, and that was, I mean, truly, when we started, I wanted to have a growth mindset, but I don't think I knew how to have one. And the way we would go through problems or situations in the work, and you would help me reframe and think about it differently. Where, I mean, I can think of a time where, you know, especially as a new leader, you have that challenge of like offloading your workload to someone else and having someone else do it. And we were trying kind of an experimental thing. And I had somebody else working on it and it didn't go well. And when I showed up to our coaching session, I was like, see, this was proof I shouldn't have pulled out of that. And you said, no, that's not what that proved. That proved that you had space to do that better. Like you had space to work with that person maybe a little bit longer. Maybe next time, the handoff will look different. Maybe you'll stay in it a little bit longer. Just the way you helped me reframe that these things I was trying and not seeing success on right away was that learning. It was that failure to learn. And
And it
just,
was important for them too. Like we could go into the
yes,
whole point of that, right?
totally yes. Absolutely yes. And I think, I mean, it's trial and error, but it's being willing to fail. And it's knowing that it's not truly a failure because you're growing, you're evolving. So that was super helpful.
So good. I love that. You had mentioned at one point when we were talking about, recording this episode, how important that your self-talk was in this process. So I'm curious some thoughts that you have about that as it relates to failure and growth. And I have a feeling it's all circles around here.
Yes, totally. It's interesting though, because while the self talk when I was exploring and failing, the way I framed it to myself was not maybe initially as growth minded as I want it to be. What stands out actually is how you pushed me into self belief and in owning my strengths more and not shying away from them and not softening them. Even when I was telling you, I would say things I was good at, but I would caveat or and you were like, no, like fully own it. Like you're very good at this. Believe that you are very good at this, which that idea too of truly, I mean, it's trusting yourself. It's both self-talk from like watching how you're framing things and like narrating that process to yourself, certainly. But at the same time we were doing that, we were also identifying what I was good at and what I uniquely brought, which allowed that self talk to be stronger.
How do you hear? I mean, the caveats didn't go away. I can't imagine they do. We're human beings,
No,
right? You still have them in your mind now. You're just way more aware of them, is my
right.
assumption, right? You're just more aware of it and you have a lot more perspective of it and you don't hear it and believe it all of the time anymore, because of that awareness, things like that. But what does the caveat sound like in your brain these days? I like the idea that this is a caveat. That's a funny way of thinking about it. It totally is.
Yeah. You are right that I stop myself if I'm good at that, but this person really brings that side. I'm like, well, mm, actually they do, but I also bring this other space that they don't have. So, um, and I mean, God, we live in a world of social media and constant comparison. And also, it's hard as women I feel like to own your power and to feel proud of yourself without diminishing, your contributions. And
A caveat that comes to mind for me, I think women are so good at this. I mean, all human brains really are, but it's, yeah, I, I did the project went really well, but, and then you focus on the one thing that went wrong instead of the 10 things that went right. Yeah, that conversation, yeah, it went good, but I could have done,
right. I could have done,
I should
I
have done.
wish we had, yeah. But a lot of people contributed. Like, it's
Just
also, it's
taking
all of it.
your own contribution to it. That's all really subtle negative self-talk.
Right,
It's really
right,
subtle ways of essentially like tearing yourself down or not giving yourself credit or just, yeah, very subtly just discounting you, progress made, success, wins, whatever it is, in really subtle ways, right? And over time, that really eats away at you, right? It becomes a habit of thought. I mean, it's one of the patterns I think I regularly have to work with my clients on, and I start to really call them out as soon as I notice that they have this habit in their mind. They don't even see it as a habit, right? You just think it's truth on some level, but then I call it out, and then I'm like, I just want you to know from here on out for the next 6 months, I'm not going to let you do that anymore. I'm going to tell you. And then all of a sudden they realize how often these little subtle little underminings come. What have you noticed has changed since you've been able to much more recognize the way you talk to yourself and not undercutting yourself and those kinds of things? What's really changed for you?
I mean, confidence for one. So I mentioned with Addie, I had my first promotion. With the twins, I had my second. When I came back from maternity leave the second time, I felt like I knew who I was. I knew what I was bringing to the table. I knew too, having gone through, having a maternity leave, I was gracious with myself, but I had full belief that I was going to deliver,
Mm.
that I was going to come, and I had my place, and I was going to,
Which was different than
yeah,
Addie.
lead. Oh yeah. Yeah. With Addie, I was like, yeah, desperately finding my footing.
I gotta prove myself. I gotta get in there. I gotta like show them
Yeah.
what I can do. I gotta show them that
Right.
pregnant, like being a mom isn't gonna change my whatever. All the
Right. And there was so much newness. I mean, again, standing up a service line that had no definition. I mean, it had some definition, but needed a lot more definition, needed staffing, needed process, needed technologies, all of those things. There was, and we were demonstrating it. We had our first client projects in that space and making sure those proved that this could be a really great addition to our company. So, a lot of proving myself, certainly, a lot of trying to view my contributions in a different way, not as an individual contributor, but rather at a leadership level, definitely different. And yeah, pumping and having a crying baby and, all of the things. Yeah. Lack of sleep. Yeah.
So your company sponsored your coaching, right? So just for full
Hmm.
transparency there, and that's something that I have a handful of other companies that do. I have an offer that I is specific to maternity leave coaching, right? So companies hire me to be a maternity leave coach, essentially. So I coaching with women before they start their leave, a little bit in their leave, but mostly after their leave. Like, and that's really what this moment was all about for you on
Yeah.
some level, right? It was kind of getting you through the journey of like embarking on a whole new adventure in life and
Yeah.
figuring out how to manage it and to not jump ship, which is what so many women tend to do. Statistics show, in fact, in the first 18 months of someone having their first child, they make a lot of career decisions, and 1 in 3 leave their job during that period of time, right? And I'm sure you can understand why. It's like so much going on, so much newness. And so the coaching, even though this wasn't necessarily specific to maternity leave coaching for you, like it was that period of life for you, and it was like a crucial moment for you to get the support and to deal with the mindsets and to get to have rebuild the confidence and see yourself in a new way and trust, not just in the workplace, but in the mom place, in the home place, right? That you can do this. So good. I never even thought about that before. So I want to shift into talking about compartmentalizing, because I know that this was a big piece of the coaching journey for you. I'll leave it at that. You can tell us a little bit about what I mean by compartmentalizing and sort of omitting emotion, if you will, and what that sort of looked like, and what some of the lessons were for you.
Yeah. So when we started coaching, I perhaps naively thought, okay, I am going to learn how to, when I say robotic, like I wanted to become a perfectly compartmentalized person who could experience situations at work very neatly, tie them up with a bow, leave them there. I would have my home life, and that would be very separate. And I would just really learn how to turn off emotion that I did not want. And I always jokingly, I went back and I found I had sent you a message of why won't you let me become the emotionless cyborg I wish to be? I thought, I do pride myself on professionalism. I try to show up in a very specific way. And yeah, through our coaching, you reminded me, unfortunately, I am human. And
You
that
are no
trying to
robot.
deny emotion
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I mean,
often didn't serve me.
I'm sure that I know this is the case for other women as well. This is what we think it takes in order to really have the career and advance in the career and have the motherhood experience. You're supposed to completely compartmentalize. And by compartmentalize, what we mean, that's the emotion, right? That's what we actually are compartmentalizing when we talk about compartmentalization, is we're boxing in emotion, and in a lot of ways, we're stuffing emotion down, not feeling emotion in lots of areas of life. And we feel like if we can do that, we can just figure out how to do that. If we were just emotionless, and then, we'll be able to manage life in a better
Yeah.
way, and experience more balance. So I don't think you're alone in that.
Yeah. Well, and I also pride myself on being a problem solver. I've had people describe me in the workplace as a fixer. So I wanted, in any situation, to be able to very quickly pivot and never get upset about things, but rather immediately get to a solution mindset very quickly, which I do and I try to do, but you helped me learn that sometimes you can slow down in that.
Yeah.
It's okay to sit in a feeling,
Mm.
address that, and then problem solve next.
Is it really okay to sit in the feeling? Tell us about
I'm working
sitting
on
in
it.
the feeling.
Let me
Tell us
throw
about
the
sitting on.
disclaimer.
What do you know about the philosophy of sitting in the feelings and not compartmentalizing? Let's start with that. So
Yeah.
I mean, it took a bit of convincing, right? We had to
Yes.
like literally come up with a different way of thinking about emotions, a philosophy on it that your brain could like latch onto. And so
Yes.
what do you know now about emotions and why you shouldn't be compartmentalizing them at work or at home for that matter?
What? Yes. Well, first, emotions, I feel like, especially for women, is such a loaded word. And when we say emotions, we tend to only think of the negative, which is definitely how I viewed it. And that was definitely a theme in our coaching of emotions can be all of the good ones too. The belief, the energy, the excitement, the positivity, the passion, like that is all emotion based. So there's so many positive emotions. So again, like taking emotion out of the equation is not necessarily the answer.
And so, I mean, there's a clear reframe here, though. It's like all emotions are good on some
Yeah.
level. There's like this belief all emotions were bad. That was sort of where you were coming at it. You probably didn't know that at the time, but we sort of uncovered you were living by this belief that I shouldn't be any of these things, really. Like I should not be, I shouldn't have emotions on the good or the bad side, or right. And so we had to flip that and come to this new philosophy. Like actually emotions, there's a whole spectrum of them and they're all okay. There's nothing wrong with emotions.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, completely that. And it's so funny because emotions showed up positively for me for years. People would say, you bring a lot of passion, you bring a lot of energy, so it's like, I should have known that emotions could be that, but it wasn't until we were talking through it that kind of illustrated for me, I can't, you can't have one probably without the other. It's not that you're
Right.
never going to have negative emotions at work, and that by shoving them down and waiting to deal with those emotions until you got home might potentially negatively impact your home life.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Which is, I mean, prior to kids and probably prior to even being married, that way of operating probably wasn't bad. I mean, it was a way that, and it worked for you for a while, right? And it worked to be able to compartmentalize that and then come home and decompress that however you want to decompress that. I mean, we could make an argument for why that maybe wasn't the healthiest of things, but it was the habit. And so you didn't have a different way of operating, so you just did that when you had a kid, and so, but then there was a big impact on that, and you saw the impact of compartmentalizing your emotions at work and how that was affecting your home life in a not so great way. Then what did you have to, or I mean, even now, like 18 months later, how do you think about emotions, or what are some of the ways that you start to process those a little bit more in real time so that you're not doing that so often?
Yeah. Well, one, coaching, it felt like gave me permission. Not that I needed permission to feel things, but it really allowed me space to. And I say that like I don't want to make it sound like I'm an overly emotional person at work. I'm not, but I care deeply. And when you care deeply, you're going to be impacted by how things go. And so naming the feeling and recognizing sometimes when I'm rushing to a solution or the next step or moving too quickly to, resolve something, that sometimes that was not in the best service, primarily for myself. That I needed to name it. I needed to acknowledge how I was feeling without judgment. I think I was very quick to say, back to caveats, I would be so quick to say, well, that person probably didn't mean it like that, or, I probably took that the wrong way, um, or we didn't give enough space. It was too little time to pitch that idea, or, whatever. I would so quickly dismiss, like, and I would feel that I shouldn't feel the way I felt. And so I would shove it down, I would solve the problem, and then at night,
Right.
come
Just
back
come
to
home.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think naming it, I think giving permission to not immediately try to fix something was super beneficial. And also recognizing that I don't, sometimes when I would feel that negative emotion or whatever emotion, if it was one I didn't want to bring home with me, I would kind of tell that to myself of like, okay, this is where it's at right now, but we're going to do what we need to, whether it's journaling or something right now, so that this is not my
Yeah.
focus tonight.
Yeah. I was actually curious if there is a couple of little tools that you use to try to like actively process it. So do you literally write out some thoughts, or like emotional thoughts out?
Yes. And when we worked together, because I would caveat it to you, you were like, no, just spew unfiltered thoughts. Stop,
One
stop
way of processing.
carefully.
Yep. No,
Yeah.
carefully craft it. Like,
Right.
that
Right.
was a sucky situation. I hate that
Right.
that freaking happened to me, and it's so blah blah. Yeah.
Right. I'm ticked that that budget got cut or whatever. Like, yeah, I I would, journaling is one of just, even if it's an open doc that I'm going to close and delete and it's never going to see the light of day,
Yeah, of
just getting it out there.
purge the thought download.
Yes. Well, and we talked about writing like the next three things I was going to do out of that frustration or out of whatever, of what am I going to do in my immediate future. And I would usually try to include like a walk or doing something physically to
Yeah,
just not stay exactly in that moment,
yeah,
change
yeah.
my senses.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that tool. I love it. So that kind of leads us probably into another tool that I know was really important to you and that you talked about continuing to use, which we called it thought adoption, right? Because probably out of processing all of the gunk of messy thoughts that you, or feelings really, and thoughts that you have, comes like the other side of things, which is the thought adoption. It comes with like intentionally thinking things and creating new mindsets and new ways of thinking about things that are a lot more supportive to you. They're certainly much more positive, but they're just more supportive to the kind of person you want to be, the kind of life that you want to lead, the kind of emotions you want to have in your life, and so forth. So, tell what does that look like today? Thought adoption.
First off, that was one of my absolute favorite tools that came out of coaching.
It sounds like you still use it.
Yes, I do use it, and quite frequently. And whether in moments, yeah, where I'm coming out of a certain emotion, or even just in a positive headspace, and I want to set forth an intention.
Can you give us like a specific example of that?
Sure. Well, and before I say that, what was so powerful too was working this with you, where I would try to tell you, okay, I want to adopt this thought. And you would call me out of, you cannot control that. You just tried to name a thought that you have not, you may have influence on, but you don't have control of. So, like, even framing the types of thoughts that I can adopt, that I can own, that I can make real,
So
was a
just
really
for
useful
example,
part.
like what I would say, it's like if you came out of a meeting and you were super ticked off, your thought adoption probably isn't going to be, wow, that's super great. That was such a great meeting. Like if your default is to be ticked, we can't go to the other extreme in thought and think that your brain is going to accept that, right? Like it's going to completely reject it and because it's too extreme, right? So when we start talking about coming up with new ways of thinking about things, it's like you could walk out of that meeting. If your default was ticked, you could probably reframe it or adopt a new thought that said, that was hard, but I learned a lot from it. And that probably feels better than where you're at than, where you're initially at. Right. So that's a way that just as an example of what I mean by that. So totally.
Yeah. Or I would say, like, a thought of, I will change everyone's minds about X. And it's like, well, you don't control that. So,
Oh,
like,
I see.
that's
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's a good one.
not something that
Good
you
one.
can, you can influence. But
Yeah. I just want them to know or to think that that X, Y, or Z about me or the situation or whatever. Well, that's you don't get to do that.
right.
What
So
do
it's
you
like,
want
dang.
to
Yes. But one that comes to mind, I will have a long and successful career.
Mm,
What do I like about that? And then running through these supporting questions. And my favorite supporting question is, what do I like about this idea?
mm,
Because it felt so empowering to,
yeah,
like, choose thoughts based on what I felt good about and
yeah,
what I liked and what I wanted. And so I
yeah.
loved that question. And even sometimes I'll have just thoughts as I'm like cleaning or something, and this second thought will be, why do I like this idea?
Yes, I
And
love
it's
it.
like, oh,
Such a good one. I mean, other questions I use are like, how am I already in support of this idea? How do I already live this idea out? How does it benefit my future? How does it benefit my family? Right? These are all like questions that help your brain find evidence for the truth of a thought that you want to think more dominantly, right? And so for just to give the listener some context here, like we start using thought adoption when we start uncovering sort of like philosophies and mindsets that aren't really helpful to you, that are kind of holding you back. I was just talking with a client earlier that was talking about how in a broad sense is just she always feels like she's got to be working, and so she kind of had this idea, if I'm not working, I'm not successful, literally, like if I'm not actively working. And so we had to start talking about thought adoption and how is rest an active part of work, right? Like it's a different way of thinking about it. And it kind of twists your mind for a moment when you go, but I don't really believe that. Well, if I really thought that was true, well, what do I like about that? Why do I want to adopt that? Why does it make sense to me? How am I already on board with it? Like then you start asking all these questions because then we remember that our thoughts are just thoughts, right? Like they're not truth. And that was probably a big thing that came out of coaching, I assume, for you is recognizing that just because the words go through your head doesn't mean that it's actually true. You get to decide what you want to believe about anything at any given time.
Completely. And it helped me once with a really discouraged team member for me who said kind of a feeling as a truth. And I said, well, that's one way to see it. What's another way you could look at this? What's another thought you could have about this? And same thing, like it gave me not only the permission for myself to like choose a different thought and then find all the reasons that that was true, that I could do that with my team too, to help them out of certain situations.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that is one of the ones that I hear from leaders and managers that trickles down into their direct reports and into their one-on-ones and things like that, is just being able to help hear other people's words as not true. And so you hear somebody else, somebody on your team, or even your spouse for that matter. We do this really well with our kids, just so everybody has the skill set. We listen to our kids talk and emote. And obviously, we know that what they're saying is not the whole truth. They can't know the truth at 3, at 5, at 7, even at 10. My daughter's 10, right? She doesn't know the whole truth. Her words are just her perspective of it. We're easily able to do that with our children because we put it under the caveat, well, they're just kids, right? But it's actually just they're humans, and they only have a flashlight view, a very narrow view of life, because that's all that they've lived. Well, the same is true for all of us, right? So when you're listening to your direct report or your husband share a story, as you get better at it, you start to go, okay, well, that's just a piece of the puzzle, right? That's just like the flashlight view of this. There's so many other ways that they could be thinking about it, or that could be true, right? It brings so much perspective. So good. Oh my gosh.
I loved the repetition of it too, because that exercise really focused on doing it kind of habitually and coming back to it. I remember I was at a conference in a hotel bed writing down, why do I like this? What do I already know to be true?
I love it. I love it. So good. What I'm also hearing though is like in all of these things that have really stuck with you, there's still a lot of active nature to like it's maintenance still has a lot of activity involved in it. It still has a lot of intentionality behind it. And I think that's really important for our listeners to hear, is that like a coaching process, anything that you learn, tools that you learn, I assume that they've become somewhat habitual to you on some level. It's just like you grab a pen and a paper to write something down, that there's a habit formed in that, but it still takes actively doing something to shift your mindset, to feel your emotions, to not like go into the weeds with your direct reports, to think about your values, to all these things take activity. And we love the idea that I'm going to learn something and I'm going to internalize it, and it's just going to become a part of me, and I'm never going to actively have to think about it again. And that's when I know I have arrived. And that's when I know that I've experienced life and the work-life balance in the way that I want, or whatever it is, right? No, you still got to go to the workout if you want to maintain weight loss, right? You lose 10 pounds, 20 pounds, however many pounds, and you still got to keep working out. Otherwise you're going to gain the weight back. So I love what I'm hearing in this, is that you have found we talked about so many tools and strategies and created that toolkit for you on some level, and you found the ones that really stuck with you and made a difference, and you've maintained using them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think you helped me build awareness of patterns. So noticing, just bringing this mindfulness to, certain situations and how I typically respond to them, or things like that, so that I could be more aware.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, so much good stuff. So if we were to kind of wrap this all up in a nice shiny box and bow with the holidays coming along, what would you say, how would you describe life in terms of its differences now, because you went through the coaching experiences and because you're utilizing tools in the way that you are?
I feel more capable
Mm.
as a mom slash leader.
Mom of three. Let's just be clear.
Yeah, mom of three, multiplied really quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel more capable. I feel empowered with, again, like tools, strategies, awareness. I feel more intentional. I think when we started, I felt a little powerless. I felt like situations are beyond me. And I feel now in a place of power in terms of deciding both, sometimes what I want to pursue, but also how I want to think about things or how I want to reflect on things. Or so I do feel more capable, more in control. Yeah. And a little bit more settled about all of it.
So good. And I think that, I mean, that word control, I think is a really important one. And one that maybe has a bit of a negative connotation, to it. We don't want to be controlling, women can be labeled as that in some way. Um, and yet we do really desire control over our future, over our destiny, if we want to go there, right? Like we desire control in life. We don't want life to be just happening to us. We want to be in the driver's seat of it, right? We want to be directing it. And so that's what I'm hearing. And as you describe this, right, it's that you have you put yourself in the driver's seat and are making very intentional, thought out decisions on how you big things in life, the direction you're heading in life, choices you're making, but also in just how you want to feel about life, how you want to think about life, how you want to
Mhm.
have, in little daily interactions be in life, right? Like you're feeling very capable and in control of those things as well, which is really where most
Mhm.
of our life is lived in the daily
Mhm.
small moments, right?
And I think more self-belief too of if it doesn't go okay, if it doesn't go exactly how I want, I'm going to figure it out. And I feel like you helped remind me time and time again, well, okay, if in that situation, what else would you do? Or, what skill sets might you bring to the table? I think there was so much of that. Like I left really feeling, again, back to the word capable, like I can pivot. I I am capable. I have the skills I need.
So good. Oh my goodness. This has been so fun, Kelly. I mean, it fills my heart for sure as a coach, obviously, but it's so fun to hear your story and to hear how far you've come and to hear what these tools are that you continue to use. Awesome. You're amazing. So good. You're doing so good.
You are too. Well,
Well,
thank
thank you
you.
so much for coming onto the podcast. Working moms, if you are interested in going through the same kind of journey that Kelly went through, that you are interested in a values-based living, like really being, not compartmentalizing your emotions, really taking control of the way you're thinking and feeling in your life, this is the perfect container for you. And I would love to talk to you about that. You can go to my website, www.rebeccaolsoncoaching.com, to learn more about and to book a time to connect with me. All right, Kelly, I'm sure we will be connecting soon. And to all of you out there, let's get to it. The next step to getting unstuck and having more days where you bounce out of bed feeling certain that you're doing exactly what you want to be doing, regaining your confidence, ending all of that negative chatter in your head, is to book a free breakthrough call. This is a strategy call where I will guide you through setting a vision for the life that you want to lead as a working mom, and then I'll lay out a plan for exactly how we will achieve that together through one-on-one coaching. You can book that call by going to RebeccaOlsonCoaching.com/book. All right, working moms, let's get to it.